Oh, yeah, that's good. Oh, hey, we got 4 rules here in Brawler. Crush!
Alright, I'm a sucker for great video game titles. And when a title is Bierzerkers, you gotta do an interview and talk about that game because it's sort of, yeah, it draws eyes, I have to say. So, well, I guess we'll start there. The title, where did it come from, and sort of what kind of game is it?
Sure. Well, I'm glad you like the title, and I'm glad that it's eye-catching for you. That's good. That's a sign of a good title, I think. It comes from a mix of the type of gameplay and setting that we're going for with Bierzerkers, which is it's a multiplayer brawler set in the Viking afterlife. And of course, in the Viking afterlife, you drink and you fight. And the drinking is our healing mechanic, and we tied that in with beer and Bierzerkers. Sort of was a nice mismatch of all those concepts tied together.
Yeah, because it's not as catchy with like mead-zerkers, which, you know, the Vikings were drinking mead, which is not as tasty as beer. But yeah, great names. Tell us a little bit about what is about the Vikings that you felt like this is something that we want to make a game out of.
So when we originally started making the game, we knew we wanted to make a melee-based multiplayer game because we're a very competitive group, and that's how we came together, was through competitive gaming, and we felt like there wasn't a lot of games out there that filled that melee niche for us. So once we sort of decided that and started working on it, the Viking theme just kind of naturally came up because it's just such an iconic cultural symbol, and there's so much media out there already that depicts them in various ways, whether they're accurate or not. And that's one of the things, like with the title, Bierzerkers. We know the Vikings didn't drink beer. We know they didn't wear horned helmets. But what we're doing is we're sort of playing up all of those stereotypes and kind of just cranking it up to 11, taking it to an extreme, sort of laughing at itself a little bit along the way, too. It's a lot of humor.
I don't necessarily like the actual realistic picture. The picture of Viking is probably a little bit depressing. Like, you know, you went out on a boat for months and months and months, and then maybe you came back home at some point.
Exactly. Yeah, we're kind of poking fun at that a little bit and sort of saying, okay, well, there's all this over-the-top stuff out there. What if we just went totally off the deep end with that?
So you mentioned that sort of that competitive edge and sort of where you come from. So what do you feel that is necessary for a melee game to sort of cater to that crowd? Because there's a lot of, like, let's be honest, like that crowd is perhaps the most demanding out there in video games.
Yeah, well, I think for good reason. There's a lot of crazy variables that until you really start to get into it, you don't think about. With Melee in particular, positioning is really, really important, and you're transmitting a lot of information about where people are over a network, and they're very close together, which can be very tricky. So that's just a big technical problem that we've had to try to solve and work on. But as far as demanding Melee, one of the things that's super important is making sure people feel like they're actually hitting each other and reacting to hits. And you get into trouble there when you get big groups of people close together and everybody's kind of swinging wildly, sort of like what I would imagine a real life giant melee would be like. It would just be nuts. So so what we do is we're working on a lot of design features that sort of encourage people to break off into smaller groups and have good objectives to go to and fight with, and make sure that as much as possible the fights are really interesting and compelling.
I think for players, maybe there is that sort of tendency, unless you distract us, that we'll just go into a big bowl in the middle and just hit each other.
That's hard to avoid anyway. People are going to do that a lot of times. The first time they get in there, that's, you know, oftentimes the first thing they want to do. So that's natural, and I think we handle that okay. But we're designing around that in a way because we want this to be a compelling, deep game. You know, easy, really, really easy to just pick up and play right away. But we're all, like I said, we're all competitive. We're all kind of hardcore, and we want to have a lot of meat for people to dig into for a long time.
And you're taking the early access route. Well, why did you choose to do that? And sort of, what are you looking for from the community during development?
Sure. So the reason we're doing early access is because we want to maximize the amount of input we can get from the community. We want to have there be a way for people to play the game and give us their feedback, give us their thoughts, and allow us to continue making the game we want to make. And we're not necessarily turning down partners or just trying to completely stay away from that, but early access lets us do that longer. And if we do well enough in early access, then we can keep doing that for the length of the production of the game. And like I said, it's a really, really good way to just get that feedback from everybody, to understand, watch them, see what they're doing. It's a nice venue to just sort of put yourself out there and see who comes to the game. Is it market viable? Do people want to play this? And we'd rather find that out now and get their input and get their feedback and make the game as good as it can be directly with that feedback from them.
So if you sort of, I mean, I understand that it's a changing landscape, but what is the sort of the roadmap ahead with the game? Sort of when do you feel that you're, what kind of milestones, if you will, even though you don't have a publisher, what are there?
Well, obviously getting to early access is a really big milestone for us. We've actually ran a small alpha test earlier in the year to help us prepare. We're doing some alpha testing now and bringing some more people in to help us make sure that early access is in good shape when it's out there. We don't want to just throw something out there that we don't feel like is going to be compelling and good. Beyond early access, we've loosely looked at a 3 to 6 month window to get to what we call a full release. And what we feel like a full release is all the features that we envision will ultimately be in the game and compelling. That being said, that could change in the early access timeframe depending on how the community reacts. Maybe people don't necessarily want the same feature set that we think they're going to want. And if that's the case, then we still like that time window. We don't want to be languishing in early access for an excessive amount of time, but we do want to make sure that the feedback we do get actually does impact the development of the game.
Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks. Have a great show.
Yeah.